Great. I think maybe we'll just start and then see who's gonna join us. But welcome everyone to our today's session on more efficient, safer, and better using voice assistant to empower professionals, hosted by German Autolabs. So since it's a breakout session today, we want to engage all of you and keep it very interactive. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or also use the chat function on the right. I will take care of all the technical and organizational questions. So please let us know if you have some issues or anything else. Also, so in the next 45 minutes, Holger and Ivana are going to give you insights on voice assistants, automation, professional drivers, and much more. They will find the answers on how commercial vehicle OEMs can help their customers to solve one of the largest problems in today's transportation business, and we'll also talk about how professional drivers can be supported in their daily life. So without further ado, I would like to give it up to you, Holger and Ivana.
So thank you, Han, and thank you for the kind words with all these digital sessions and conferences here. Very difficult to tell where people are listening to us. So wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Maybe there are people here from rather Israel or Japan area. It's great to have the opportunity here today, and I actually will now also share the screen. So I hope you can see this now. Yeah, but it looks pretty well. So as Han just introduced, we are German Autolabs, a Berlin-based technology startup, about 5 years old. We are focusing on AI powered voice assistants, and this with a very strong focus on drivers and here especially professional drivers. And for the next 30-40 minutes, we actually would like to give you a little bit an understanding why voice assistants for professional drivers are so meaningful and the way to go. And actually, in order to do so, I decided not to do it on my own. I brought here Ivana with me. Maybe, Ivana, why don't you start to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Holger, and hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. I've joined Holger and his team at German Autolabs approximately 3 years ago. My focus is on international business development. I've spent more than 15 years, almost my entire professional life, working in fast-paced, innovative technology setups, mostly startups. And as it is very typical in startup life that you wear multiple hats, my second love at German Autolabs is project management. And in that role, I can support the whole journey of implementing new customized technology solutions and the changes and optimizing processes by that.
Exactly. And the reason why you're here today with me on stage is, of course, because we later will also talk in depth about a quite big proof of concept pilot that we did last year together with the DHL and Volkswagen commercial vehicles. And Ivana was the master to coordinate that. But actually, to kick this off, we wanted to give you a little bit an understanding on the status of voice assistants and why it is almost the perfect addition in the HMI, in the human-machine interfacing, when we talk about professional people. I mean, we all know the voice assistants, of course, like Alexa and Siri, very popular these days, to listening to music, or also in the car to adjust the heating system or switch on the lights, which is all nice, but seriously, there were always solutions to do this before, right? I mean, no one really froze to death over the past 2 decades because there was no voice assistant. But if we go to professional people and we look into their respective daily work life, we have very specific situation here that I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on. So think about professional drivers like a last mile driver, also a cyclist bringing you in 10 minutes your latest food delivery. People are driving a car, cycling a bike. They cannot paralyze tasks as you can do at your desk while you switching screens and you watch on your smartphone, etc. That's not possible because you need to focus and you need to drive a vehicle safely in traffic, which actually is the next thing. It's something that is extremely related to safety. If you drive a vehicle, you endanger other people. You risk your own health and also let's say driving license if you do not comply with all the rules. And therefore, distraction is the worst thing you can get. And here, of course, a voice assistant can support perfectly. The other thing is very natural. I mean, we all know that sometimes we did this in the past. We hope not anymore that you type a WhatsApp or a text message or a line message while waiting at the red traffic light. But of course, this is not how it should be. And while it still works maybe in a car while you're sitting comfortably, it's not working if you're walking and you need to focus on the road ahead or when you're cycling. And then, of course, hands-free is a big issue. You should not type. All of that is something where voice assistants are, as said, the perfect interface here. One thing that we must not underestimate is that all the digital communication that people have today, no matter if in a professional life or in personal life, is related to our smartphones, of course, and to screens. I mean, if you look in latest car models, they almost consist only of screens, which on the one hand is distracting, but it's also something where visual information need to be digested and it's distracting. So and here we close the cycle, so to speak. That all something that speaks very much for voice assistants for professional drivers. And this is also how we see what we're doing. We simplify, we augment daily routines with the support of voice assistants in a safe and hands-free way for people who doing driving for their life or who actually are in a working environment. And that has, of course, as we just already elaborated on, time saving and efficient effect, because I can parallelize tasks. So while driving a car and looking for an address, I can ask the assistant for additional information. And Ivana will elaborate how important these information may be for the profitability of a tour in the last mile business. Safe and safety, that's something that I already mentioned. Distraction can kill people. We have all these issues, and we know it with cyclists in traffic. We have fatal injuries here, etc., and that has sometimes to do with drivers being distracted. And that is, of course, something that we want to underline here. We made this to the needs and to the DNA of a respective use case, but also this is something that we will look at in a second. So, having talked about that very generally, what are the solutions that German Autolabs is working on? I mean, I said we are 5 years in business. We started with the consumer retrofit voice assistant that we had with a couple of thousand units driving out there on the streets, and we learned a lot. And that learning and understanding we put into the DNA of our today's solutions for professional drivers and mobile workers. And one solution here is what we call the last mile assistant. And I mentioned that we have this pilot with DHL in the UK. We're working with two handful of other last mile companies. And last mile is not only parcel delivery, it's also grocery, it's same day delivery. It's what you know when you ordered something in your pharmacy and it's brought to you within 4 hours. All of that is very relevant because the density of stops is so high. I mean, imagine that a last mile driver from the big brands like Hermes and DHL, etc., they do up to 200 parcels per day. 200 parcels per day means easily 150, 180 stops, a very high condensed level of information that needs to be computed by a human being. So the other solution is, or another solution, so to speak, is something that we see in the same way relevant, like the assistant proactively informs you about information that are relevant. You maybe also want to share something with an assistant. I mean, that is something that we somehow consider naturally with an assistant like Alexa, that you talk to Alexa. By the way, you only can talk to Alexa. Alexa cannot proactively talk to you. But if you're on a tour like this newspaper guy here, it's a real case that we're working at the moment at. They observe a lot of things that making their tour efficient or not, like access codes to apartment houses or changed opening times, or all these nitty-gritty information that are important for a tour. But today this is completely analog. Now with the data collection assistant, we can annotate that data, and this person could now say to the assistant, we will see this in a second, hey assistant, please keep this note for me and share it in the database. And last but not least, our offering here for heavy trucking, more forwarding, road transportation, our dispatcher system, where with more or less the same means that we already talked about, we create a solution here where we ultimately solve the biggest issue of European road transportation is it's the language. A lot of the drivers actually origin from Eastern European countries or Northeastern Lithuania, Ukraine, Belarus, etc. While the dispatchers speak German, English, French, and so on, not in general, but it's a major setting. And here we actually bring a solution where the assistant can automate the communication between the dispatcher and the driver. So just to illustrate that a little bit more, and I will come with a video in a couple of minutes because we know that videos are the best thing you can bring in a session. It's very entertaining. But let's start here with these dialogues. So in this case here, for example, we have this driver here in Milan who actually now receives the information on his tour from the assistant telling him exactly what to do. And there's a tiny thing that is essential that is usually missed or can be missed if it's just in a head unit or it's just in a scanner device. There was a complaint of this customer, and it's a premium customer. So if this delivery service takes his customer serious, he wants that the driver is asking at the next stop. That is information that's in the database, but the driver in this very stressful day must not forget about this. The assistant easily can remind him and can tell him what to do. Or like in this case here, we mixed up a little bit the two scenarios where this driver, who's a Romanian driver, actually wants to inform the system that there is a store who has changed opening hours. And just telling this to the assistant in his language, the assistant is confirming this, say, okay, I have the information, thank you, and then automatically translate it into the respective language of the database, not the computer language, but the spoken language, in this case here, English. And this information never had got in a database if you would ask your driver to type this into a mask. Last but not least, that's the dispatcher system we see here on the left-hand side. A dispatcher somewhere in Germany. Interesting, it's a German dispatcher speaking English. So anyway, let's assume this is a dispatcher speaking English, and he again wants to communicate with his driver here. And what we do now is that the dispatcher just pushes that question to the assistant, and the assistant kicks off a conversation like a chatbot with the driver. And that is every day's life in freight forwarding in Europe. That a dispatcher is sitting somewhere in London or in Lyon or in Milano, and he has a driver in Madrid, and this driver is speaking Bulgarian or Romanian, etc. So what they do today is they call in Bulgaria or in Romania, and there are agencies employing interpreters, and he's asking this interpreter to call his driver. And this is in 2021. So with this, again, we have a solution here that is perfectly made for professional drivers. So easily to set up here with the dispatcher interface on his general work tools, and for the driver, of course, either in his head unit or in this case in his smartphone. Good. So I mentioned this before. We do not only talk, we also deploy, and had this very interesting pilot here for us with DHL. DHL, of course, the 800-pound gorilla of the industry. We did it in the UK, in Leicester last year. Everyone can imagine that was a certain challenge, of course, during all the lockdowns, etc. Nevertheless, we did it over 6 weeks. And the setup was a little bit like you see it here on the left-hand side. You see we used a tablet that was for a convenience factor. The final target device will be a scanner device, the usual scanner device that drivers always use. But here we had it on a tablet as a secondary device. And while the system is showing information, that's something that the video just will illustrate in a second. It also tells the driver what to do, and you will see it's very impressive what happened to drivers, especially to peak drivers here. I tell you, you will not believe the numbers that this tool created. So let's start. I promised, lean back, get your popcorn, and now a little bit video time.
Last mile delivery drivers have to manage a lot of tasks, especially these days. They need to safely operate their vehicles in all traffic and weather conditions. They need to make sure that the parcels they have been trusted with will be delivered or collected on time and with the best possible service. Therefore, we teamed up with German Autolabs to build and test the best-in-class voice assistant for professional drivers, and we integrated it into our Volkswagen Crafter. My name is Arthur Hasselberg. I am head of new business development at Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles, and this is how our last mile assistant works.
Hi Carl. Today's route contains 85 stops and 6 collections. Stop 1, 241 Victoria Lane, Clock Farm. This stop is NYN. Stop 31, 91, Sycamore Road, Mrs. Emma Courtland. Instructions, leave with neighbor if not at home. This stop is YYY safe.
So let's get back to this mode. So, and I told you that it is really impressive what we learned with this pilot and the numbers that we achieved here. And maybe Ivana, you were so close to it, you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you can see, the primary goal obviously is always to increase efficiency. There is a lot of need in logistics for innovation these days because the volumes are unprecedented. So new hubs are being built, new activities are being planned. But for now, the key factor is how to best cope with the existing infrastructure, how to make the most out of that. And what you see here is now an example based on this true last mile parcel delivery case, which we had, showing how the added value of intelligent assistance, voice assistants, translates into really measurable success factors. So if you take the first number, the 76% performance boost on new drivers, you know that there is a huge shortage on drivers in logistics anyway. Last year, this shortage was extremely high because of the high volumes. New drivers were coming from totally different areas of business, being dancers or artists before, so losing their jobs because of COVID, for example. So this means totally new on the job, unknown processes, unknown routes, unknown locations, and that needs time for onboarding. And what we saw is that these guys were able from day one to the second week to be on a full load. So normally they start like with 30 or 40% only of the usual load, and they need weeks, at least 6 weeks, to get up to speed. So in this case, they were much faster. The second figure you see about compliance, very important too. I think we all know the situation ourselves from getting parcels, downloading certain apps, putting in our preferences, where to leave the parcel, for example, when we are not there. And we probably all had the experience already that many times this is not respected. So here's why, because that information is somewhere hidden in some back menu of the scanner, and the driver is so much under time pressure that very often he doesn't get to really search for that information. So we had here 90% compliance. I mean, that's massive. Out of 10 complaints coming in, there was only one, because the assistant would proactively voice those instructions to the drivers, like you saw in the video just a second ago. This kind of why safe, for example, means you can leave it in a safe place. So they would comply with that, and there would be less complaints. Another very important KPI for all courier and express delivery providers is first time delivery success. So we all know that the margins in this business are extremely competitive. And that means that every time a driver cannot deliver the parcel at the first time, but needs to come twice, that margin is mainly eaten up. So by delivering the first time, they could really have an increase on the margins overall as well. And last but not least, that's something Holger already mentioned before, peak. Last year, there were more peak days than usual. Peak days are those days where the volumes are extremely high. You may think about Cyber Monday or Black Friday, and then obviously the Christmas season. And peak drivers are usually drivers who don't do the job all year, but they are just contracted for these high peaks. So again, by having a voice assistant on board, telling them exactly where to go, when to be there, how to cope with the delivery instructions, we saw that those peak drivers could do 34% more in terms of volume than they could usually do without having an assistant on board. So overall, we can definitely say that additional value has been created, and the result was rewarding for everyone who was in this project.
Great, thanks, Ivana. And yeah, I think it's obvious how the impact is of this assistant. I mean, it's fair to say that this pilot was very much focusing on the last mile, but anyway, I mean, the numbers are very convincing. So coming back to what the German Autolabs is actually offering here to enable fleet owners, but also makers of fleet management systems, as well as OEMs, not only with commercial vehicles, because I mean, a lot of passenger cars, actually, as we all know, are set into fleets, salespeople, maintenance people. All of these respective vertical groups are perfectly suited for being supported with the voice assistant, and we deliver the solution for that in a highly flexible, very versatile software structure that does not actually require on the fleet side nor by the OEM to change anything in the existing infrastructure. We actually, if you want, so piggyback on systems like tool management, navigation systems, customer management systems, etc. And the driver's interface, or the interface to the driver, is naturally an app in a driver's phone, in a scanner device, for example, on the transportation. But we also, as you could see, did this here in a head unit. So as mentioned before, it is something where we offering a solution that does not require a complete new setup. We dock into the driver apps of the standard driver apps, and with the simple app update, the assistant actually is live. And with the case here with DHL, we will talk in a couple of minutes a little bit with Ivana how much the effort was here to integrate this. So much about a voice assistant for professional drivers and mobile workers. And I mean, as you can imagine, we also could come up with a 250 slides presentation, but we wanted to keep it digestible for you, also a little bit entertaining. And now we have a little bit more time, so maybe there are already any questions at your end, then we are more than happy to answer them. And until the first questions coming in here, we wanted to talk a little bit about, Ivana, about our experience, about your experience with the cases that we have on the road. So, I mean, DHL is a big company. I mean, it's the biggest logistic company in the world, except of Amazon, of course. Meanwhile, I think we have to consider Amazon a logistic company, but DHL is a big player here. So I could imagine that it's a huge effort to get a system like ours into their infrastructure. How was your experience with that? How long did it take to have an assistant live, even in a demo setup?
Yeah, let's say that we certainly didn't get bored. It's been a hell of a ride. It took us approximately 6 months. So we had a very ambitious time plan because we needed to implement the whole project before Christmas. So despite of COVID, we had to make sure that everything smoothly works during that period. And I think that, as always, planning is very important, planning and getting all the stakeholders at one table. And that's possible even in a remote way. So everything has worked really hand in hand. We had DHL on one hand as a stakeholder, but we also had Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles. They were our automotive partner. Like you showed before, there was a phase where we tested the solution on a tablet, but the final setup was to have the solution really embedded in the head unit of a crafter, and that crafter had to be sourced in the UK, and then we had to do the integration. So there was quite some work to do. We took approximately 3 months for development and, well, concept development and testing.
Yeah.
So then we had the integration, which was done directly in the UK, and we were supporting that remotely because we only were able to travel there twice during that whole period. So everything was really Zoom calls and very active conversations with all the stakeholders.
Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, I would imagine that especially under those conditions like COVID, etc., how did it work that you at all could manage to integrate this into a system that you barely knew before, right? I mean, we had this setup with the scanner, the drivers still were using the scanner, we had the secondary device. I mean, how could you connect so quickly?
Yeah, it sounds complicated when you say that, but at the end of the day, when the requirements are defined very specifically, and that's what we did, we really said exactly the kind of information we need, because we connect to the back end, and then there is only one small part compared to all the data DHL
Sure.
has in the
Yes.
big cloud, which was needed for us to operate our use cases in an intelligent way. And we just got the APIs and could integrate that. So,
So
yeah,
actually, what in summary, the entry barrier to start something like a voice assistant for professional drivers is not too high, right? So it's of course, I mean, there are compliances, etc. But if the APIs are available, and every backend today has according APIs, it's not work of 2 years or even not a year. It can be done.
Not at all. Yeah, sure. I think what is really important, and this has helped, is our experience in knowing exactly what we need to
Sure.
put this into action, and defining very clearly on the other side what APIs need to be set up. And then, yeah, it was not complicated at all, actually, and it could be well fitted into a very stressful period for DHL, despite the whole COVID thing. Yes.
No, that's good and important to know, because we know, of course, not only in the world of OEMs and tier ones, but also in the world of their customers, like the fleet owners. There is a lot of stress currently, even more through what we face with the Corona crisis. And that usually creates some, I would say, focus on the day-by-day work, but actually with the numbers that we have seen, we also could help to lower that burden with the voice assistant. Yeah.
Yes.
No, great. In general, I mean, it's a little bit odd that the CEO is asking you that, but I would imagine that at least 80% of people here listening to us could come up with that question, because we know that question. So what does this thing make different to Alexa? I mean, could that be something that Alexa Automotive could do?
Yeah, we get that question very often, in fact, and there is a huge difference, actually. One of the differences you already mentioned in your presentation, I think that's very important, and that's the proactivity. So the idea of our assistant is that, you don't need to query, but he will tell you proactively at the right time where you are and what you need to do next. So basically the idea is that even I could sit there, like those replacement peak drivers, I could just sit there and have this assistant telling me what to do, and I could do the job. That's the idea behind. So productivity. Then the intelligence. I mean, we are connecting, as we said before, to the back end and pulling information, which is then translated into logistic specific natural language models. We like to say that we speak logistics, and saying that we speak logistics not just applies to the language models, but also knowing the workflows, which are most complex in logistics, and really creating intelligent workflows with voice assistant to optimize those processes. So I would say that that's definitely a huge difference. We work offline. Another very important differentiator. So even if there is a non-covered area, and we know that happens very often, especially in remote areas, our assistant is not going to leave you alone. He will still understand what you ask for and answer. Yeah, so I think.
And I mean, to add that, it is definitely also something where and you mentioned that. I think there are features and functionalities that are so specific. You cannot just, I would say, define in a pure dialogue, right? We have the next stop prediction. We have intelligence in the system, like the SAFE, which is a risk measuring algorithm, understanding how stressed the driver is, and all of that delivers a complete solution. So let's quickly, because we're almost running out of time here, but also talk a little bit about another use case that you're currently working at. I mean, we cannot tell names here, but I mentioned that. So there are these newspaper guys, right, in South Germany. I mean, there are 11,000 people delivering every morning the newspaper, which is amazing. It's still a big thing in Germany for those of you not from Germany. In many other countries as well, the newspaper in the morning in your letterbox, quite popular. But there are human beings bringing this to you, right? So, and that's also interesting. Can you quickly describe what we are doing there?
Yes, sure. Yeah, actually, this is a very interesting case as well, because what we are mainly doing there, we are digitizing their delivery book. So you may not know that, but these guys have all the information printed in a paper book. So now you can imagine that everything which is printed on a paper book on a daily basis, what it takes to be updated. You know, every time there are certain changes, every time you have last minute changes, like someone telling you that he's going to be away for the next week and he doesn't need to have the newspaper delivered, or that you'd have to leave it somewhere else. I mean, that last minute information is definitely not going to reach these guys.
Yes.
Now, by digitization, same like in the example we saw with DHL, we have real-time updates with very little effort. They can just dictate information into the system and it can be transferred automatically into the database. So they have an up-to-date database. The user experience for the guys is much easier. Again, even in this newspaper industry, you have people who are from different places, who don't understand the language so well, or who are not familiar in certain locations where they are working. So they can do all of this in their own language. They don't even need to do it in German, but they could even do it in their own language. So this also is a help with regards to the language barrier. And all in all, it makes both the onboarding process and even the ongoing job easier, both for experienced and for new.
Yeah. No, great. I think that is really impressive, and also the numbers that we presented here to you. Maybe at the end, let me elaborate a little bit on one thing that we read all the time. So, what is the return on investment on a voice assistant? And we all know that today's voice assistant in vehicles, in cars, is a very popular feature or asset. While it's difficult really to measure this. While on the other side, and that's something that Ivana and I also try to make clear today, that if we think about professional workers, if we think about B2B use cases, it is you can count it. It's something that you can measure, where the investment into this additional interface, and that's also important to understand. There is never only a voice assistant. There will be graphical interfaces, haptical interfaces, but in HMI, voice is just so convincing because it's safer, it's faster, it's more convenient. In the right use case, you can measure that, you can calculate that, and you have very strong arguments to implement that. Good. So I think we are almost done here in our schedule. I asking the audience if there are any questions.
I think there's one question in the chat. I see, right?
One question in the chat. Oh, I have to go back to the chat. Here are the questions. I was on the Q&A. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Alvaro asked here a very good question. What are the key adoption challenges faced in the process? Yeah, I think, Alvaro, we elaborated a little bit on that. One thing is, of course, that depending on the legacy, there's, or let's say other way around, there's always a legacy, so we have to look into the systems. And it is something that is very specific to build a voice user experience. And I think that is for the adoption very important, that today people think a voice assistant just reading out what otherwise could be displayed visually, and that's not true. to form the dialogues and to find the right experience between the voice assistant and the driver and the user, that is something that is very specific, and it's specific in the category. So it could be the vertical, but it also could be the individual customer. But other than that, I think there are no really challenges. I mean, there are things to do, but what we usually like to tell or like to say is that we have a 80-20 ratio, where 80% comes as a ready-to-use product, and 20% in this is customization. Any other questions here now that we have here everyone together? My pleasure. Good. No, it's not the case. Then, Han, I think we hand it over back to you.
Great. Thanks to Holger and Ivana, of course, for the great insights from German Autolabs. Also for all the participants, if you want to get in touch with German Autolabs personally, we are very happy to connect you afterwards. And yeah, so again, thanks to all of you, and excited to see you in all the other sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And all the best. Thanks for listening, and see you all soon, hopefully in person again.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.